A simple man found a crying waitress in the rain, unaware she'd lost everything but hope. Daniel never expected to stop his truck that night. His route home was always the same, straight past the closed shops, the silent diner, then a left onto Willow Lane. But tonight, something changed. He saw her. Before we move further, please ensure to like, share, and subscribe for heartwarming stories like this. Just ahead, slumped beside the rusted dumpster behind Rosie's diner, was a woman who didn't look like she belonged there. Head down, soaked apron, shoulders shaking with a kind of quiet despair that made Daniel press the brake before his mind caught up. He pulled over, engine idling, eyes locked on the figure barely holding herself together. Daniel wasn't the type to get involved. He fixed things, leaky roofs, jammed doors, broken banisters. People, though, that was different. But something about her, alone, unmoving, pulled at him. He stepped out. "Hey," he called, cautious but calm. "You all right?" No answer. Just a slow turn of her head. Her face was pale, eyes puffy, lips trembling. Whatever had broken her hadn't just happened tonight, it had been coming for a long time. "I've lost everything," she whispered. Those 3 words stopped him. Not because he didn't understand them, but because he did. Deeply. He nodded once. "Come on," he said, extending a hand. "You don't have to stay here." She stared at it like it was a foreign language. Then, slowly, she took it. Inside his old truck, the heater groaned to life. She clutched a towel he had tossed from the back seat, still staring straight ahead. "I'm Lily," she said finally, voice barely above the rumble of the engine. "I worked at that diner. Got fired today. Manager said business was dead. I went home, and my landlord had changed the locks. Didn't even let me grab my things. Not even my shoes." Daniel glanced down. Her feet were raw. She was wearing slippers, worn, thin ones that barely passed for shoes. His grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Anywhere you want to go?" he asked. "No," she said, her voice catching. "There's no one left." Silence filled the truck, but it wasn't awkward. It was the kind that happened when 2 people, strangers on paper, recognized a shared loneliness. Daniel didn't ask more. Instead, he turned the truck around and headed toward his workshop on the edge of town. He had a cot in the back, usually for long jobs or when the weather turned rough. It wasn't much, but it was warm and dry. Lily didn't protest. She stepped inside, took the blanket he handed her, and sat quietly on the edge of the cot. "You sure about this?" she asked, eyes wary. "I've been worse off," Daniel replied. "You'll be safe here. Rest." She nodded, curled up, and within minutes, her breathing evened out. But Daniel couldn't sleep. He sat in the next room, staring at his hands. He wasn't a rescuer. He wasn't rich. Just a man with a toolbox, a truck, and a heart he thought had gone quiet long ago. But now, something stirred. Maybe it was the way she had whispered, "I've lost everything," like a final confession. Or maybe it was because he knew what it was like to hit the bottom and have no one notice. Tonight, someone did. And that changed everything. The diner was dark, its neon sign flickering faintly above the door like a heartbeat slowing to a stop. Daniel pushed it open with one hand, steadying Lily with the other. No one had been inside since the doors shut for good 3 days ago. But Daniel still had a key. The manager often called him for leaky pipes or busted lights, and never got around to asking it back. The familiar creak of the floor beneath their feet echoed louder than usual. Silence clung to the place like dust. Booths stood empty, menus still scattered on the counter, as if waiting for customers who would never come. Daniel led her past the kitchen and into the small staff room, flipping on a weak bulb overhead. She didn't say a word, just stood there dripping, arms wrapped tightly around herself. He dug out an old towel from a drawer, handed it to her without a word, then knelt by the corner heater. A few matches and some patience later, it crackled to life. The faint warmth was immediate, curling up around them like a secret they weren't supposed to share. She peeled the wet apron from her shoulders, sat down carefully, and pressed the towel to her face, more to hide the emotion than the rain. "I'm Lily," she said softly, voice catching. Daniel nodded. "Daniel." She managed a small smile, but it didn't last. "I used to work here. 3 years. Then last week, they said payroll bounced. Said they'd catch up soon. But by this morning, the locks were changed. I went home, and those locks were changed too." Daniel didn't respond. Not with words. He sat across from her, elbows on his knees, watching her carefully, not in judgment, but with quiet attention. Something about her cracked voice, the way she gripped the edges of the towel like it was an anchor, he knew that look. He'd worn it himself once. You have family? He asked. She shook her head. Lost my mom in my teens. No siblings. Dad disappeared before I was born. I've always figured things out alone. He didn't question the resilience in her tone, but there was exhaustion behind her eyes. The kind that doesn't just come from being tired, but from carrying everything too long with no one to share the weight. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small, battered notebook. The edges were frayed, corners bent, pages water-streaked. She opened it carefully, flipping to a page with a detailed sketch, a food truck, hand-drawn with hopeful strokes. Notes surrounded it, menu ideas, budget estimates, even name options. This, she said, voice firmer now, was going to be my start. Breakfast burritos, mini pancakes, grilled cheese with tomato soup, comfort food. You know, the kind people line up for when their hearts are heavy. Daniel leaned forward, studying the notebook. It wasn't just a dream. It was a plan. It had structure, vision. Despite everything, she hadn't let go of it. You're serious about this, he said. Lily looked up, and for the first time, there was a flicker of fire behind her tired expression. It's all I have left. And even that, she trailed off, gently pressing a wrinkled page flat. It almost got soaked tonight. He nodded again. Almost. She laughed under her breath. Why are you helping me, Daniel? Most people would have kept driving. Daniel leaned back slightly, eyes scanning the quiet diner. He remembered the first time he walked in here 5 years ago, fixing a burst pipe while barely keeping his own life together. Divorce papers had just come through. He'd sold his tools to cover rent. No savings, no family. Just a set of calloused hands and a stubborn refusal to give up. You remind me of someone, he said. Someone I used to be. She looked at him, curiosity softening her gaze. What happened to him? He smiled, but there was sadness in it. He stopped dreaming. Thought surviving was enough. Thought silence hurt less than trying and failing again. Lily didn't reply right away. She closed the notebook and held it against her chest like it was something precious. Then maybe you're not helping me, she said. Maybe we're helping each other. They sat for a long time in that forgotten corner of the town, two people whose lives had been gutted by quiet storms, now sitting with nothing but a spark between them. No promises. No expectations. Just shared space, shared silence, and maybe, just maybe, a new beginning hidden in the ashes. The heater popped. Outside, the town remained still, but something had shifted. Inside that closed diner, where hope once felt like a luxury, it began to feel like a seed. Daniel didn't say much on the drive back. The roads were slick, headlights cutting through sheets of rain, but his mind was elsewhere. He glanced at Lily in the passenger seat. Her fingers gripped that soggy notebook like it held her very pulse. When they pulled into the gravel lot behind his workshop, she hesitated. This is where you live? She asked. He shook his head. No, I've got a little place down the road. But I have something. He led her past the side door of the shop, around the rusted trailer hitch and stacks of lumber, to a small metal storage unit tucked beneath a sagging awning. It looked like it had forgotten what warmth was. Daniel pulled the latch and opened it with a grunt. Inside was cramped, barely wide enough for a grown man to stretch out. But there was a cot, neatly made with fresh sheets, and an old kettle perched on a propane burner beside a milk crate full of mismatched mugs and tea bags. A thick blanket sat folded at the foot of the bed. A single bulb buzzed overhead, flickering as if unsure whether to stay awake. It's not much, he said, but it's warm, dry, safer than the street. Lily stepped inside, eyes scanning the narrow space. She stood at the threshold for a long moment, pride warring with practicality. Then a gust of freezing wind swept through her coat and made the decision for her. She stepped in. That night, as the rain pattered on the metal roof and the wind howled through the eaves, Lily sat cross-legged on the cot, wrapped in the thick blanket, notebook balanced on her knees. Daniel sat on an overturned crate beside the door, sipping weak tea. You sure I'm not intruding? She asked softly. If you were, I wouldn't have offered, he replied. Lily cracked open the notebook. Her fingers traced each page like old memories. She paused, then looked up. Can I read you something? Daniel nodded, surprised by the question. She cleared her throat. This one's called Sunrise Wraps. Eggs with cumin, turmeric, roasted red pepper, and caramelized onions. Toasted tortillas. Spicy chipotle drizzle. Her voice lifted slightly as she described it, not just the ingredients, but the feeling. Warmth, comfort, color. The kind of food that made people linger. She flipped to another page. I call this one grief toast, she caught herself, smiled shyly, because it's the kind of breakfast you make when you don't know how to get out of bed. Buttered sourdough, soft-boiled egg, salt, cracked pepper, and something sharp, like pickled shallots or lemon zest. Something to wake your heart up. Daniel chuckled. That sounds illegal. She laughed, and the sound lit up the cold room like a fire. Her voice carried life in it, even as her stories wove through pain. My mom used to cook like this, she said eventually, her tone softening. Before she got sick. She'd say, feed the belly, feed the soul. I was 15 when she passed. After that, it was foster homes, waiting tables, dish pits scraping by. But this year, I thought maybe, just maybe, it would be different. Daniel didn't interrupt. He just listened, every word tugging something loose inside him. Now, she added quieter. Now I'm here, in a stranger's shed, reading recipes like they mean something. They do, Daniel said. Lily met his eyes, and in the space between them hung something unspoken, something fragile. He set down his mug. I know what it's like to plan a future and watch it get swallowed whole. Lily leaned forward slightly, curious. I was supposed to open a carpentry shop, he said. Had the name picked out, and everything, Willow and grain. Even signed the lease. Week later, my wife left. Said she didn't want to build a life out of leftover wood and second chances. That's cruel. He shrugged. Not cruel, just honest. She wanted stability. I was chasing dreams. I sold the shop deposit to pay off our debts and never brought it up again. Silence settled, but it wasn't heavy. It felt like understanding. Like the quiet you share when words have done their job. I think we're the same kind of broken, Lily said eventually. Not the loud kind. The quiet, careful kind. Daniel nodded. The kind that still shows up anyway. She smiled at that. The bulb flickered again, but didn't go out. Lily stretched back, resting her head on the cot. You know, she murmured, if I ever do get that food truck, I think I'll name one of the sandwiches after you. Oh yeah, he asked, amused. Yeah, the simple Dan. Just bread, kindness, and maybe a little cheese. He laughed, truly laughed, and for a moment, the cold outside didn't matter. That night, neither of them dreamed. But somehow, for the first time in a long while, sleep felt safe. And in a forgotten storage unit behind a dusty workshop, two broken stories began to stitch themselves into something whole. By sunrise, Lily was already on her feet. Daniel found her outside the workshop, hair pulled into a makeshift bun, sleeves rolled, as she wiped down his dusty windshield with an old rag. She looked up as he stepped out, half smiling, half challenging. Don't give me that look, she said. I'm not freeloading. He scratched his jaw, amused. I wasn't going to say anything. She tossed the rag at him. Good. Because I'm helping today. Wherever you're going, I'm tagging along. Daniel raised a brow. You ever fixed a roof before? Nope, she said, already climbing into the passenger seat. But I'm a fast learner. He couldn't argue with that kind of determination. Their first stop was Mrs. Weaver's cottage on the edge of town. The 80-year-old widow had been calling Daniel every spring for as long as he could remember. Same problem, leaky roof, same excuses. Oh, I meant to fix it, dear, but then the cat knocked over my purse and I forgot. This time, though, Lily followed him to the back of the truck, grabbed a tool belt with both hands, and slung it around her hips with clumsy confidence. Mrs. Weaver opened the door in her usual floral robe and slippers, eyeing Lily curiously. My new apprentice, Daniel explained. God bless you, dear, the old woman smiled. Any friend of Daniel's is welcome, long as you don't fall off the roof. I haven't got the strength to drag you down. Up on the roof, Daniel watched as Lily knelt awkwardly beside him, gripping a hammer backwards. You planning to charm the nails into place? He asked. I was seeing if they respond to kindness. He chuckled, genuinely. She grinned, pleased with herself. They worked in tandem, Daniel patching old shingles, Lily learning by mimicry. Her jokes came faster than her technique, but he didn't mind. Every time she misfired or dropped a nail, she followed it with a quip or a muttered curse that made Daniel stifle laughter. By mid-morning, her cheeks were smudged with dust, hands blistering slightly, but her eyes were bright. She looked alive. After the job, Mrs. Weaver paid Daniel in cash and handed Lily a paperback. Tomato scones, she said with a wink. You've earned them. Lily peeked inside and gasped. These smell illegal. On the drive back, Daniel planned to head straight to the workshop, but Lily spotted the farmer's market near the town square and begged for a detour. 10 minutes later, she was weaving through stalls like a kid in a candy store. Her eyes lit up at crates of golden beets, ruby radishes, and vine-wrapped tomatoes. "Look at these carrots," she murmured, lifting a bunch like treasure. "You can taste the color just looking at them." Daniel stood back and watched. Her excitement was contagious. She scribbled notes on napkins, sniffed herbs with her eyes closed, and asked farmers questions like an investigative journalist. When she found a stand selling homemade goat cheese, she looked up at him and said, This would go perfectly with the honey scones I made back in September. Just imagine." He couldn't, but he wanted to. As they headed back to the truck, she paused, finger hovering in midair. Then, using the dusty rear window as a canvas, she began to draw. Within minutes, a mock food stand menu was scrawled across the glass. Lily's Comfort Corner. Lemon thyme grilled cheese. Honey butter biscuit bites. Hearty grief toast. Morning revival wraps. She turned to him, hands on her hips. "What do you think?" "I think I need to wash my truck less often." She laughed, a sharp, delighted sound that rang through the air like wind chimes. Daniel couldn't help but grin. It felt foreign. It felt good. "I'm serious though," she said, tone softening. "What if we start small? I mean, I don't need a whole truck right now. What about a little food stand? Weekend mornings. Farmer's market, maybe. You build the stand. I cook the food." He looked at her. Really looked. The splotches of flour still on her sleeves from Mrs. Weaver's scones. The fire in her eyes. The way she stood like someone whose spirit was no longer held together by tape and hope, but by vision. "A food stand," he repeated. She nodded. "A table, a canopy, a few burners. Something we can grow from. I'll figure out permits. Menus. You help build it." The idea lodged itself in his chest like a spark waiting for air. He opened the driver's side door. "Hop in, partner." She slid in with a grin. "Does that mean yes?" He nodded once, starting the engine. "Let's just say, it's been a while since I built something that wasn't broken." As the truck pulled away, the dust-sketched menu still glowed faintly in the rearview mirror. Neither of them noticed the faint rays of sun finally breaking through the clouds, but both felt it. Something new was starting, and this time, it belonged to them. The food trailer was a mess. Daniel hadn't seen it in years, not since his friend Mike parked it behind the shuttered gas station on the edge of town and walked away from his barbecue dreams. The once white paint had peeled into long, curling strips, and vines had started to claim its wheels. One window hung loose on a rusted hinge. It looked more like a tombstone than a trailer. Still, Daniel saw a possibility. He called Mike, and after a long silence on the other end, his friend sighed. "If anyone can bring it back to life, it's you. Just don't ask me to taste test anything Lily makes." "I still remember her attempt at mashed potatoes 3 Christmases ago." Daniel chuckled. "She's gotten better. I'll believe it when she feeds me." They struck a deal. Cheap, fair, with no paperwork, just a handshake and a half-smile that said, "I'm rooting for you." When Daniel brought Lily to see it, she stood still for a moment, lips slightly parted, staring at the trailer like it had spoken. "It's hideous," she finally said. "Yeah, and I love it." The next morning, they got to work. Daniel handled the wiring and ripped out insulation. Lily scrubbed like a woman on a mission, attacking years of grime with nothing but a steel brush, dish soap, and the kind of anger only life's disappointments can stir. Each day brought progress: new flooring, patched walls, hinges that didn't squeak. The peeling paint was sanded down to bare metal. Lily chose a soft teal for the body and white for the trim. "I want it to look like a hug," she said. Daniel didn't question it. As the days stretched on, curious faces began to appear. First, it was old Mrs. Ellis from the corner bakery, bringing them a dented box filled with pans and mixing bowls she hadn't touched in years. "They belonged to my sister," she said. "She always wanted to run a pie stand. Didn't get the chance. Maybe you will." Then came Levi, the butcher's boy, barely 17, dropping off a cooler of fresh sausages. "Just test runs," he said with a shrug. "You don't gotta pay me. I'm just glad someone's trying something around here." Little by little, the town gathered. A basket of lemons appeared one morning on the trailer steps, followed by a sealed envelope with a crisp $20 and a note that read, "For your dream, don't quit." Lily cried when she read it. "I don't know who left it," she whispered, "but I needed to see those words today." Daniel saw how the town responded to her. It wasn't just the food. It was her fire, her laughter, her rawness. They were drawn in by it, like plants turning towards sunlight after too many cloudy seasons. He caught himself watching her more often, how she bit her lip when she concentrated, How her hands moved quickly when she talked about recipes, how she smiled even when she was exhausted. He wasn't sure what he felt, whether it was pride, protectiveness, or something deeper trying to rise to the surface, but it was constant. One night, after a long day of painting and rewiring the service window, they sat on overturned buckets beside the trailer, nursing mugs of weak coffee. The stars were out. No wind. No rain. Just a soft, gentle quiet that wrapped around them like a blanket. "Do you think people are really going to come?" she asked. Daniel didn't answer right away. He looked out at the trailer. The paint gleamed under the moonlight, crisp and fresh. The window now opened smoothly. Inside, the faint scent of lemon oil and wood polish lingered in the air. "They already are," he said finally. "We haven't even opened, and they're showing up." Lily nodded, her fingers tightening around the mug. "It's just, I've always built things that fall apart. Jobs, plans, relationships." She gave a shaky laugh. "Even my plants die." Daniel turned to her, serious now. "This isn't one of those things." She looked at him then, really looked, and for a second, everything was still. Her face was open, unguarded. And Daniel felt it, the quiet thrum of something unspoken pressing against the air between them. He cleared his throat, breaking the moment. "You need help with that logo you were sketching?" She blinked, nodded, grateful for the shift. "Yeah," she said. "Let's make it bold. Something that says we're not going anywhere." As the night stretched on, they talked about fonts and names and menu signs. But beneath it all, something else was building, stronger than plans, sturdier than paint and metal. Hope. Not the fragile kind, but the kind born from shared work, from hands scraped raw together, from strangers becoming friends and maybe something more. The kind of hope that doesn't just visit, it stays. The trailer, freshly painted in teal and white, stood beneath the giant oak near the town square like a beacon. Its hand-painted sign, Hope and Spoon, swayed gently above the open service window. A banner stretched across the front, its letters still a little crooked. "Opening today, simple food, honest flavors." Inside, Lily paced. She'd been up since 4, hair tied back, apron already stained with batter and steam. Every burner hissed, every surface gleamed. Tupperware filled with biscuit dough and seasoned ground beef lined the counter like soldiers waiting for battle. "Is this crooked?" she asked, gesturing to the handwritten menu taped near the window. "Does the sign look crooked to you?" Daniel glanced up from assembling a stool with his screwdriver. "It looks perfect." She exhaled. "Perfect is terrifying." He smirked. "Then we're right on track." By 8, the sky turned to pale, moody gray clouds gathering like spectators unsure whether to cheer or chase everyone indoors. Lily stared at them, fist clenched. "Not today," she whispered. "You had your moment. Today's mine." Just after 9, the first customer arrived. An older man in a wide-brimmed hat, his boots tracking in dust. He peered at the menu and said, "You got something warm?" Lily nodded. "Try the sunrise stew. Potatoes, chorizo, onions, my mama's spice blend." He smiled. "Your mama a taste." By 10, the line stretched past the oak. The rain threatened, but the people came anyway, umbrellas in hand, children skipping in puddles, laughter rising like music in the air. Someone brought folding chairs. Someone else played a guitar. It wasn't just a food stand anymore. It was a gathering. Daniel moved quietly through the chaos. He took orders, poured coffee, passed out napkins. At one point, a table leg cracked under a family of 4. Before anyone could panic, he was there on one knee, tightening screws, reassuring the mother that it'd be good as new in seconds. Lily barely had time to breathe. Her hands moved like memory, ladling soup, flipping sandwiches, smiling until her cheeks hurt. She didn't notice the reporter until he waved his press badge near the window. "I've been hearing about this place all week," he said. "Mind if I ask you a few questions?" Lily wiped her brow with her sleeve. "Only if you order the grief toast. It's mandatory." He laughed and handed over a crisp 20. "Deal." The story spilled out in fragments, how a lost girl met a quiet man, how a trailer came back to life, how hope started small but didn't stay that way. The reporter scribbled furiously while chewing on the last bite of a honey butter biscuit. By afternoon, the rain gave up. Patches of blue broke through. More people came, some out of curiosity, some from hearing about it at the post office or the hardware store. A group of high schoolers bought fries and left a tip that filled the jar. Someone sent over fresh flowers in a mason jar, no note. When the last order was served and the burners clicked off one by one, the square finally quieted. Lily and Daniel sat in the trailer, surrounded by empty trays, used mugs, and laughter still clinging to the air like perfume. Lily opened the cash box with shaking hands. She stared. I think we made enough to buy next week's supplies, she whispered. Daniel leaned over. And maybe even 2 stools that don't collapse. Lily laughed, sudden and sharp, and then, as quickly as it came, the laughter collapsed into tears. Not the quiet, controlled kind. The kind that came from the pit of her stomach. She covered her face, shoulders trembling, and tried to speak but couldn't. Daniel waited, patient. When she finally looked up, eyes red and shining, her voice cracked. I was invisible before you saw me, she said. Like I could vanish and no one would notice. And now they lined up. For me. For this. She gestured to the trailer, to the leftover bread rolls, to the smudged windows and empty plates. You didn't just give me a place to sleep, Daniel. You gave me a reason to wake up again. Daniel didn't say anything at first. He reached over, took one of her hands, rough with flour and burn marks, and held it gently. You reminded me who I was too. She blinked. He continued, voice low. Before all this, I was just passing time. Fixing things. Avoiding the messes that mattered. Then you sat on that sidewalk in the rain, and everything changed. Outside, the sun finally broke through the clouds fully, casting long golden streaks across the town square. Children chased shadows. Someone waved as they passed, still holding a leftover biscuit. Lily looked at Daniel and smiled, different this time. Not uncertain, not guarded, but full. Tomorrow, she asked. Tomorrow, he agreed. And together, beneath the flickering sign of hope and spoon, they closed the window, locked the trailer, and stepped into a future neither of them could have imagined alone. The scent of roasted garlic and lemon butter drifted through the heart of town. It was a familiar fragrance now, comforting, like the chime of the church bell or the rustle of leaves near the square. Hope and Spoon wasn't just a food stand anymore. It was part of the rhythm of the town. Lily leaned against the side of the diner, the building that once felt like a cold wall between her and the world. Now it served as the quiet stage for her reflection. Her apron was flour-dusted, her cheeks sun-kissed. Her once empty notebook sat in her lap, pages creased, corners curled, and every line marked with ink, scribbles, and, more often than not, big, messy checkmarks. She'd stopped calling them plans. Now they were proof. Behind the trailer, a group of new hires laughed as they boxed up leftover pastries for the shelter. All of them were women Lily had taken a chance on, each one carrying her own story of hardship. Some had fled broken homes. Some had aged out of second chances. All had arrived like she once had, tired, scared, and almost invisible. Now they wore matching aprons and left work with full pockets and fuller hearts. Daniel appeared beside her, holding 2 mugs of lukewarm coffee. He settled beside her on the diner steps without saying a word, his presence steady as ever. They watched the sun lower itself behind the rooftops, casting long, honey-colored shadows across the square. From this angle, the food stand looked like it had always belonged. A few more weeks and we'll need a second trailer, Lily said, taking a sip. Daniel chuckled. At this rate, you'll have a fleet. She looked down at her notebook, flipping to the first page. The old dreams food truck sketches, recipes scrawled between thoughts of rent and rejection letters, had become something more. Some were crossed out, some highlighted, others circled 3 times with hearts in the margins. It looked chaotic to anyone else. To her, it was everything. This used to feel so far away, she whispered. Like a life someone else was living. Daniel tilted his head toward her. But you built it. 1 spoon, 1 sandwich, 1 storm at a time. Lily smiled, her gaze far off as clouds began to gather above. The wind picked up slightly, brushing a strand of hair across her cheek. A new storm was coming. But she didn't flinch. Rain no longer frightened her. It didn't symbolize failure or loneliness anymore. It was just water from the sky, a cleansing reminder of where she'd started and how far she'd come. She closed the notebook gently, her thumb resting on the spine. I used to think all I had left was hope, she said softly. Daniel looked at her, a quiet weight behind his words. You saved me too, you know. She met his eyes. There was no grand declaration, just understanding. Depth. The kind of connection forged not in fireworks, but in the slow, careful building of trust. She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers with his. They sat like that as the first drops began to fall, soft at first, then more certain. No one ran for cover. The laughter behind the trailer continued. Someone cranked up an old speaker, and a melody drifted across the street. Lily didn't even look up. She simply smiled, wide, real, grounded. The rain touched her skin like a blessing. Don't forget to hit that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications. Share this video. Thank you.